Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here with you at this exciting event, and I know that it's going to be a time when we're going to be exchanging ideas, some facts, some experiences, some advice, and I know that this session, as far as you're concerned, is a very important one. My name is Charles Hodson. I am normally in real life, as it were, I am one of the anchors of our intercontinental global news program, World Business Today. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today because your industry is so important. Reading the statistics about what goes on in tourism is utterly fascinating. And we have this statistic that 1 billion people will travel internationally this year. That is 1 in 6 of those on the planet, very nearly. 9% of world GDP. You live and breathe all of this. And I think it is fascinating to those who come in from the outside, relatively from the outside, as I do, to read these numbers and to understand that if you look at the broader implications of what you do at the economic level, then your industry is responsible for about 260 million jobs worldwide, more than 250 million jobs worldwide. Now, I come to this also as, if you like, a customer, a client. I've just come back from the longest trip that my wife and I have ever done as ordinary tourists. It was 3 weeks long. We went to a very interesting country. I won't tell you which one. I think we had something like 8 takeoffs and landings in the course of that 3-week holiday. A very interesting time. Some very good food and some that was uneatable, some good experiences, a few bad ones, but generally very, very interesting. So I know, and by the way, I went through the visa rigmarole, so I do feel for those who have got that particular problem. Let me get on now and introduce our first speaker, well, actually a very important person, the chairman of the World Travel Market, Fiona Jeffery, who is OBE, recently awarded, Order of the British Empire. We don't have an empire, of course, anymore, but of course it's still a very important award, and congratulations. Fiona Jeffery.
Thank you, Charles. Talabrifi, ministers, distinguished guests, friends and colleagues, a very warm welcome to World Travel Market's Ministerial Summit in association with the UNWTO. As we stare into the eye of the global economic storm that swirls around the industry, impacting in some way on almost every exhibitor and visitor here at World Travel Market this week, it's more important than ever that public and private sectors come together like this to discuss how we best facilitate the industry's quest for improvement and expansion. Just a few weeks ago, you may remember the Austrian skydiver Felix Baumgartner standing 24 miles above the top of the world, edging his way out on his balloon capsule and onto a platform little bigger than a skateboard. After a final salute, he stepped off into the blackness. It may have seemed magnificently pointless, although I understand it has yielded some scientific results. But much more importantly, it shows the indomitable human spirit that sees limitations as so many challenges. In many ways, the international travel and tourism industry is stepping into the unknown too. Fiscal policies, tax levies, and government legislation are hitting at almost every turn. Travel companies are forced into being ever more innovative, while at the same time ensuring prudent budgeting in order to survive a tough climate. And the breathtaking acceleration of travel technology development is revolutionizing the very way that the industry actually does business. But like the skydiver with no fear, the industry must step out of its comfort zone, away from some of its traditional, tried and tested procedures and offerings that have won us so much success over the years, and push ahead with a courageous new age for travel and tourism. Admittedly, it's a new era with fresh challenges, but that shouldn't deter us. The industry's track record of strength, resolute determination and steady growth has already shown the world that regardless of the global economic downturn, we're able to achieve a record-breaking performance. The fact that the industry clocks up its 1 billionth traveller in December is a tribute to the way travel and tourism has overcome the obstacles that have been put before us over the years. I remain unconvinced, however, that all governments truly recognise the tremendous impact that the industry can have on people's lives and its continued potential to open up opportunities, particularly, but not solely, in the developing countries. Our GDP contribution is almost second to none, and that simply does not come across in the level of opportunity we're able to provide. There's always a suspicion at the back of my mind that the industry is not being taken seriously enough, and that because we fill the world with colour and joy, it somehow undermines the acknowledgement of our achievements and the breadth of our capabilities. I know that even some ministers responsible for tourism privately complain that they have to be constantly on their guard against budget cuts and lack of investment, even though it could make the world of difference to a country's prosperity and standing. Travel and tourism deserves much more than that, and this can only be achieved by speaking with a single voice. Organisations such as our friends at the UNWTO and WTTC continue to do a brilliant job at representing our industry and campaigning about the value of what we do. But it shouldn't be left entirely to them to emphasise the industry's worth. If you've not yet had time so far to walk the aisles of World Travel Market, I hope you'll do before you leave. Something like 47,000 men and women of every culture, background and creed fill the exhibition floors and meeting rooms, coming together to conduct business, share ideas, renew friendships, breaking down barriers and fostering understanding in a way that only travel and tourism can do. Travel and tourism is a powerful antidote to so many of the ills of the 21st century. It is up to us all to ensure that we help the industry realise its full potential. I wish you a morning of constructive and productive debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, and I think we'll see whether that suspicion is justified, that you're not being taken seriously enough. I'm sure that those who will listen to our discussions later on will take us seriously after that. I should say you seriously. I mustn't use the first person because I'm not part of you. I wish I were. Let me move on now to Dr. Taleb Rifai, who is our next speaker, who is the Secretary General of the World Tourism Organization, UNWTO. Dr. Rifai.
My dearest friend Fiona, it's always a pleasure to be sharing the podium with you. You and your team have done remarkably well in working with us to stage this very, very important event once again. Mr. Robertson, I would like to especially recognize your presence here with us and thank you very much for being part of this panel here. We're at your great country that has experienced in the last year tremendous events. Last year we were standing here talking about the Olympics and talking about the Jubilee. Now we stand here witness to the very fantastic achievements and the very, very exciting events that you have staged in this country. Baroness, it's always a pleasure to have you amongst us. Dear friends, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could recognize you all one by one. Many good friends and many new faces. One more year, one more ministerial round table, and one more exciting time for our industry. I'd like to start by thanking WTM and the team, and particularly you, Fiona, for staging this 6th year in a row ministerial event. It has become a landmark, and the way you have placed it within the events of WTM has been an extremely remarkable and appreciated step. We come here every year to do 3 main things. One is together to raise the issues that can make a difference to our sector. And it's very important that we debate all of this together. But second is to do this in the only possible way that it can be done, in partnership with the private sector. And thirdly, that we do this in a way that makes a difference in people's life, because after all, this is a people's industry. So I'd like to thank you all for taking time from your busy schedule. We know very well that you are on very tight schedules while here at WTM, and taking a couple of hours to come and share with us is highly, highly appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday Fiona Jeffery reminded us in the opening ceremony of the challenges that are ahead of us and the news that keeps pounding itself on us. Economic crisis, major crisis of natural and man-made nature all over the world. Political changes and geopolitical transformations that are earth-shaking. All of this, economic, political, and social revolutions, so to speak, have created an environment of great challenges but great excitement. In the midst of all of this, I may dare to say that the world is experiencing two different transformations that one can call revolutions happening at the same time. One we recognize and we see very clearly, which is the IT and the communication revolution that has changed our lives, not in the last 10 years, but in the last 5 years, in the last 2 years. Every day we see the effects and the changes on our lifestyle, our behavior, and the way we communicate and relate to one another. But the second revolution that is not yet very well recognized, and I'm afraid that Fiona Jeffery's suspicions are not unfounded, is the travel revolution. To see that 1 out of 6, as Charles said, of the people of the world are crossing international borders every year. And 4 times as much, 4.2 billion travelers are doing domestic trips in their own countries. It means that every citizen, every person in this world feels the right and the need to travel at least once a year. This is a true revolution that is changing the way we behave, the way we communicate, and the way we relate to one another. Last month, in one of the very important conferences that we had, I had a very distinguished journalist from Spain that said, "Travel made me a better person." And I think that is something that I would like to always keep in mind and remember, because it can make better people out of us. Last year, 2011, we hit 990 million international travelers, 10 million short of the 1 billion, which will be reached in December of this year. All the indications are that that is going to be the case. As a matter of fact, this year and up until August of this year, there was a growth of over 4% globally, which makes us way ahead of the target of 1 billion that will be reached hopefully by the end of November and the beginning of December of 2012. This is an opportunity to recall the tourism's capacity to stimulate economic growth, to generate jobs, and to spur sustainable development. 1 out of 12 jobs all over the world are created from the travel and tourism industry. And every job created in the travel and tourism industry creates another supplementary 1.4 jobs in other sectors. It's a powerful tool that is underutilized now. So at this very critical moment, it is very important to raise awareness among those that take decisions and outside of our box on the importance and the relevance and the significance of this historic moment in the transformation of one of the most important human activities, travel. But in order for us to be able to give this tremendous human activity its full potentials, and in spite of its ability to resist in being one of the most resilient industries and to grow in spite of all the difficulties and the challenges, there are still major barriers and major obstacles, ones that need not to be there and ones that we can do something about, and that's precisely what we are here to discuss and debate today. At UNWTO, in collaboration with our friends, and particularly WTTC, our very good partners in the private sector, we have identified 3 main barriers. One is the issue of entry formalities. Visas are being treated today as something really of an archaic nature. We are really not up to date with what it can do and what it should be done about it. We can't understand how countries are paying so much money to promote their destinations and paying just as much, if not more, to tell people, don't come to our countries. a contradiction that does not make any logical sense. 2, air connectivity is still a problem in many destinations. Many destinations that are so dependent on reaching their lands and their shores are being deprived because of ill-sighted and short-sighted policies. 52% of world travelers today are traveling by air. It is a very important challenge to connect the aviation industry to the tourism industry. And I'm precisely delighted to see many of the representatives of the airline industry here with us today. 3, last but not least, taxes, especially unintelligent, unreasonable taxes that create distortions to the market, are still creating a very big barrier. All these 3 barriers, border formalities, connectivity, and unreasonable, and I underline unreasonable here because taxes are a fact of life, but intelligent taxes are what we're asking for, are barriers that we need to discuss and debate and hope to come up with something in today's debate. Let me very quickly just run you through the first 2, which are going to be the backbone of this debate. One is the issue of visa. This message was carried very brilliantly by a very, very visionary president, President Felipe Calderón of Mexico, and represented here by a wonderful, wonderful Minister of Tourism, Gloria Guevara, to the G20 meeting last June in Las Cobas in Mexico. And for the first time ever, the G20 final declaration singled out tourism as the only sector to be referred to in the final declaration. And I quote, they say, tourism is, quote, a vehicle for job creation, economic growth and development. They further went on to say, and I quote, travel facilitation initiatives, meaning visas and entry formalities, in support of job creations, quality work, poverty reduction and global growth are a must. This is a major, major breakthrough that world leaders at that level have been able to do. In addition to these principles, there are many, many things that happened in the last 2 years on the ground. Only last month, we heard about a historic agreement between the USA and Russia in trying to eliminate visas between these 2 countries. This was unthinkable not 2 years ago, 1 year ago. President Obama issued an executive order in February ordering to increase the number of visas, realizing that with every 62 new visas, 1 more job is created in a country like the United States. Imagine how that would do in many other smaller countries and many developing countries. Many, many, many initiatives were done in that regard in Latin America, in Asia, among the ASEAN community. Examples like staging events and making special conditions for entry formalities during the events, and I'm sure, Minister, in the UK you must have gone through that. Our friends from South Africa also have experienced to put in place some procedures just to make sure that the events are successful. These procedures, if they make sense for 2 months, they can make sense for 2 decades. And we need to multiply that and make sure that we are putting the right measures in the right place. Actually, UNWTO research shows that in the last 2 years, 40 countries, 40, in the world have made significant changes in their visa policies and facilitation, moving from visa to visa on arrival, that was the most, to e-visa, or to no visa sometimes. By significant changes, we mean, by definition, the implementation of these measures that would affect positively more than 20 countries. So you can imagine the amount of work that was done in the last 2 years. 4,300 bilateral facilitation measures were done only in the last 2 years. So we have come a long way and we have done a lot. Our research also shows that the majority of measures were from visa to visa upon arrival. E-visa is still lagging behind for no understandable reason. If the airline industry was able in the last 10 years to cancel the paper visa, the paper ticket, why can't we actually move into that direction and make life easier for everybody? Finally, our research shows that in the same period, only a few, very few, less than a handful of countries tightened their travel measures, which means that we are hitting on the right button in the right direction and uploading the right policies. In this endeavor, we are very proud to say that our friends in IATA, our friends in OECD, in the World Economic Forum, the European Union, APEC, ASEAN have joined hands with us, and we are building a broader coalition to try and advocate and have some sense being put into this very important barrier. The second barrier, that of connectivity, is even more important. And I must say that we are at the very beginning, and I hope that this forum would be a groundbreaking event so that we could carry this thing further. We hope to achieve two main objectives, at least at the initial attempt to try and connect the aviation industry more closely to the travel and tourism industry, which are not yet logically and reasonably and well connected. One is to continue to raise awareness at the highest level of government that visa facilitation and air connectivity, particularly air connectivity, should be a priority issue in policy that is aimed at economic growth and facilitation of the growth of this industry. But two is to empower you, particularly the ministers of tourism and other authorities, with data of best cases, best practices, and how to move forward. If we can do that, if we can start that today, we would have achieved a great, great event. Ladies and gentlemen, our Executive Council of UNWTO 2 weeks ago met and decided that the next stage mandated to us as a United Nations specialized agency for travel and tourism is to connect better to the aviation industry. I hope this is a start and this is the beginning of the translation of this mandate that was given to us. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, and in closing, 1 billion international travelers means a great responsibility, but great opportunities as well. It is 1 billion acts, a small act multiplied by 1 billion is a great, great power. We can make so many changes around the world, and we have so much responsibility that we can do by empowering our travelers with the right messages and the right attitude and the right impact on societies and countries and communities. In order to prepare for that event, I must close in announcing to you that we have designated symbolically the day of December 13 of 2012 to be the day that we are assuming that each and every one of us, we're part of the 1 billion, will be making a landing at some airport somewhere around the world. In Barajas, Madrid, where our UNWTO organization is based, we're going to be staging in the middle of the airport a very modest celebration by handing a flower to every man and woman, not only to women, in celebrating the arrival of the 1 billion traveler. I hope and I really urge each and every one of you to celebrate this in your own countries. Today, there will be a launching of an online campaign as well. I would invite you all to visit it and try to make an impact out of this, because it is through awareness raising that we can make a difference and we can show the strength and the power of our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, Fiona in particular, thank you so much once again for a wonderful, wonderful event. It's already promising to be a success with the participation and with the number of people that are here and with the quality of the people. Charles, once again, I thank you. I know that this is a very important day for you. Today, a very important country in this world is going to make a very important decision. And I know that you and your colleagues are very tied up and busy in trying to follow up that news, but you chose to take off and be with us today. We hope that we'll be together at night as well to watch and observe the development of this event. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, once again, and I wish you all the best in your deliberations. Thank you.
Dr. Taleb Rifai, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to sit down in a minute, but I just want to stand up here to introduce the panel. Taleb, you've laid out the agenda for what I plan to do really beautifully, but I want to start with some of, if you like, some of the positivities. What's worked well? How has it worked well? How can others perhaps adopt and or adapt that to their own circumstances? Then I think we want to talk about some of these obstacles, how we overcome them, what progress has been made, where we can see ourselves perhaps in 10 years' time. And that, I think, will take us very comfortably through the next hour and a half or so. Let me waste no further time in introducing the panel before sitting down myself. Let's start over here. Obviously, you know Fiona and Taleb, but Hugh Robertson is the Minister for Sport and Tourism for the United Kingdom. And as Taleb said, we have just I can use we since I am a Brit. We have just hosted the Olympic Games, and of course the Queen's Jubilee has also taken place this year, so it's been a great time for celebration, and many people have visited us, and we've been very glad to have had them. Next to him, Dr. Michael Frenzel, who is the chairman of TUI Travel PLC, a very large travel corporation, ultimately German, but clearly very international, as I know all of you are as players in this business. Next, Abulfaz Garayev, who is the Minister of Culture and Tourism of Azerbaijan. Then, Tewolde Gebremariam, who is the CEO of Ethiopian Airlines. Joining us then, Sheikha Mai bint Mohammed Al Khalifa, who is the Minister of Culture from Bahrain. Delighted to have you with us. Jeff Poole, who is the Director for Government and Industry Affairs of IATA, needs very little further introduction. Coming straight, I'll be sitting here. Next to me, Martinus van Schalkwijk, who is the Minister of Tourism from South Africa. David Scarsel, who is President and CEO of WTTC, World Travel and Tourism Council. Gloria Guevara Manso is the Secretary of Tourism for Mexico. Next to her, Vijay Punasamy, who is the Vice President for International and Public Affairs for Etihad. Honourable Minister, next to you is Ramon Jimenez, who is the Secretary of Tourism from the Philippines. And finally, last but very far from least, Dirk Vande Beek, who is the Senior Vice President for Corporate and Government Affairs for Travelport. I actually want to start with you, Dirk, because talk us through a little bit of where this phenomenal growth is coming from. Because I think the thing that intrigues people looking from outside the industry is how it is able to sustain the kind of growth rates that among nations you would associate with China rather than with Greece.
In regards to traveling, or in regards to the amount of people traveling?
Where are they coming from? Where's the growth coming from? Who are they?
Well, I think we've all seen after the economic downturn that people are beginning to travel again, and it's a very positive thing for everyone. It affects the economy. We've seen with the Arab Spring where their tourism numbers of people going into those countries have gone down, and the economy is affected immediately. I think that it really has shown the importance of travel and tourism to the world. And I think that more and more people have an opportunity to travel. In China, people are traveling, whether it be domestically or internationally. And we're just seeing the opportunity has grown, the doors have opened, and it has become easier to travel. I mean, we still have many barriers, but at the same time, we see, for example, in the States, we have pre-check. If you're flying domestically and you travel a lot, it's easier to get through security. We want to see that for everybody. Internationally, there are other programs. But I think, from a tech point of view, I think that technology is making it easier to travel. Working closely with the airlines, working with the governments, we're finding ways to help with the visa issues, with everything else. And when you make it easier to travel, people will travel.
Okay. Honourable Minister from Mexico, Gloria Guevara, you've had a very successful year, I imagine. Do you continue to have a successful year? What sort of numbers are you looking at in terms of the growth of tourism this year for Mexico?
Well, last year was a very interesting year because we were able to create the foundation needed to really grow in tourism. We broke the record. We had more than 191 million travelers, and that's including domestic and international. This year, we're hoping to break the record one more time based in where we are today. And what's driving some of that is the changes, for instance, in travel facilitation. One of the examples that has been great to us is the fact that we now accept the U.S. visa as a valid visa. So whoever has a U.S. visa, they don't need to request a Mexican visa. And as a result, from that measure alone, we have received 1 million travelers so far. And that is telling us basically that when we make it easier to the travelers, we can receive more people in our country, regardless of the nationality. So far, we have seen an increase of 143 different nationalities, some including some countries that are facing some challenges. But I guess they see that it's easier to travel to Mexico, and also they find great value for their money. So for us, it's very clear we need to work more on getting some also regional visas In our region of the world, we're a little behind. And what I'm saying a little behind is that in Asia, for instance, you can travel to multiple countries and get one visa. The Asian visa is a great example. You don't have to apply 10 times to different visas just once and travel to different countries. In our part of the world, you need to get multiple visas to travel to other region, and that's a challenge that we're facing now.
Okay, that's great. I think we'll talk more about visas, but that certainly set the ball rolling in terms of growth. One of the things that's intriguing is not just the driving forces that come, or if you like, the suction that comes from easier border formalities, but also major events which put people on the map. And I'm turning to you now, Mr. Grayev, Honourable Minister from Azerbaijan, because of course you hosted the Eurovision Song Contest, which as far as you were concerned was, you know, let's put it lightly, a big deal. How do you leverage an event like that to put yourselves squarely on the map and to make sure that people, you know, think about you when they're planning their holidays?
I think that Eurovision contest was one of the events which pushed the image of Azerbaijan forward to the map of the world tourism. Of course, it was difficult to be ready for that within a short time of 9 months when we constructed all these facilities to present to the world. But of course, I must note that during this period of time, it was a special regime for visas which was announced and which was prolonged for the next big events which we had in our country, like soccer championship, world championship for ladies. Then it was several international forums. Next year we are going to have the World Forum for Intercultural Dialogue, and we are going to implement this kind of visa regime permanently for the big events. You know, we are in a little bit different situation. You know that Azerbaijan is a new country on the map. We are still suffering the reflections of the former Soviet Union, system of the tourism arrangements, but we are trying to move it forward. We can't avoid visa regime because we have occupation of the territories by the neighboring Armenia, you know, due to the Karabakh problem, but we go forward. Today we managed to ensure the society and the people of Azerbaijan and entire friends of the country that tourism is one of the promoted and privileged directions of the development of non-energy economy on Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is not only oil, and we managed to prove it, and now this contest, these events are attracting more and more people to Azerbaijan. Believe me that last year was successful for us, not only due to the different events which we had, but the huge development of the infrastructure. We have now, during 1 year, all the biggest chains of the hotels in our country, starting with Four Seasons until Fairmont, with the Marriott's and whatever.
How quickly does all of this translate into increased numbers in terms of, say, tourist
I will
arrivals?
tell you that every year we have approximately 50, 60 new hotels starting their activity. Last 5 years it's like that. And I think that the understanding of the possibility of the tourism started when we involved tourism to the special state program for the reducement of the unemployment and job creation, and started to work strictly with the World Tourism
Are the
Organization.
hotels in the tourist areas, or are they more in the business areas associated with the oil industry?
I think that the start of the tourism business in the country started with the oil business. Of course, the first tourists were those who were involved in the oil industry. But nowadays, it's quite a different situation. You must be aware that the GDP of Azerbaijan today consists on 80% on non-oil sector. And one of them is the tourism. That's why we are proud that we pushed it, and I hope, and I must thank that in these efforts, in the legitimation matters, in our links, in our international events, we are very thankful to the World Tourism Organization, which is supporting us even today with the preparation of the special legitimation, which will open some possible gates for tourism development in the country.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So that the picture from Azerbaijan. Hugh Robertson, if we can come to the UK, clearly the Olympic Games, actually, which happened within a very few miles of this spot where we're all sitting now, clearly huge numbers of people came, some for the very first time, to the UK. How do you get them back? And how do you get them to stay? And how do you get them to move away from, if you like, this centripetal force of the Olympic Village?
Well, I mean, part of the Olympics was, of course, held here in the Excel Centre, so we are actually in one of the venues. But it's in a sense, you will get a lot of people who come for an Olympic Games. I think this is an experience shared by Greece, shared by China, others who've hosted it recently. A lot of people will come for the event itself. What the event gives you, allied to the extraordinary television coverage you get, and people are talking of a global television audience of around about 4 billion for an Olympic Games. 4 billion people around the world who see some part of an Olympic Games. What you get is an extraordinary amount of free advertising through that. And I suspect that the effect of this will be twofold. One, people will see that on their televisions. And secondly, if they watch anything of the opening and the closing ceremonies or the way an Olympic Games is run, that helps reframe their perceptions of a country. And I think we were, if I'm honest about it, conscious of the fact that people thought they knew Britain, but they may have had a view of it that was 5 or 10 years or sometimes even 20 years out of date. You watch a very modern, buzzy opening ceremony, and somebody actually said to a ministerial colleague of mine, "It was fantastic what you did. We would never persuade our president to jump out of a plane." So it's those sort of things. I mean, that's at one rather trivial level, but those sort of things do change the perception of a country. And somebody said to me brilliantly at the end of an Olympics, it was 7 years, I was the minister responsible for it, and it was 7 years in the preparation. Somebody said to me afterwards, "You just have to accept nobody will ever thank you for laying on these sort of competitions." That is absolutely right. But you do get the chance to change international perceptions of your country. And I think that, in a nutshell, is what it can do for you.
But there are some difficulties, aren't there? Because it's been pointed out that,
yes.
you know what, the problem is that a lot of people think, the Olympic Games is on in London. I won't go to London. I'll go somewhere else, or I'll wait until after the Games because they're going to be just huge numbers of people. I really don't fancy the crush. And a lot of people stayed away, and a lot of tourist destinations felt that they had rather a bad year, not only because we had a bad summer in terms of weather, but also because people went to the Olympic Games, hopped on the plane and went back home again.
Yeah, I mean, there is a balance here, isn't there? I mean, you're absolutely right. Probably the Olympics wasn't the only reason we had a dreadful summer here. But anybody who looks at an Olympic Games knows that there is a pretty straightforward effect, which is that people tend to avoid the country for the period of the Games itself, but then come back in increasing numbers, providing you get it right afterwards. I mean, that was very much the Sydney effect. I gather it's very much the Greek effect, certainly very much the Chinese effect, and I suspect that will be the impact here. I mean, the number of times as the Olympics minister, one went on to do international media, and it was framed by images of the equestrian venue at Greenwich or the archery venue at Lords or the view across the Thames down to the Olympic Park. Those sort of positive images of the country play a huge part in attracting tourists in the following years, but you can quite understand why people who are not coming to don't want to come for the Games themselves would avoid it over that period.
Good. Minister, thank you very much indeed. David, can I come to you? I mean, you, in your position, you talk to a lot of people in the industry, you talk to a lot of people in government. What's your impression? I mean, again, to put a little bit more flesh on these bones in terms of statistic. What is working for people? What is it that is boosting? I mean, we've heard about visas, we've heard about major events, we've heard about building up the infrastructure in terms of hotels, but there is more to it than that, I imagine.
Yes, let's start at the top level. We work with UNWTO talking to heads of state about the industry. And the reason we talk to the heads of state is it's very difficult. It's quite a lonely life being a tourism minister because you're having your internal battles with your finance ministry and your interior ministry on things like visa facilitation and taxation. So when we sit down with the heads of state, we talk to them very specifically about not just the growth in their country and the level of investment required, but what they need to do differently to free up some of this movement of people around the world. So if we just take the US example that Taleb referred to, the US had lost something like $600 billion since 9/11 because they had been overly protective with visa processing and airport security processing. And it took probably 18 months of the private sector talking to Obama's administration to get him as the head of state to focus on one issue, which happened to be visas. in the way his administration is configured, he is the only person that can take the judgment between a commerce department and the tourism people wanting visitors to come into the country and the Interior Ministry or Homeland Security in that sense wanting to keep them out. So once Obama finally got the message and stood up publicly and asked the State Department to do something about visa processing from places like Russia, like Brazil, now you see it translating into more income for the US and more people traveling. And I think that's one big lesson. And if you take the lesson that Gloria Guevara was talking about, where the Mexican government took a significant risk probably in saying that if you can battle your way through the US visa processing system and get a US visa, that's good enough for us. You can come to our country. And you could make the same argument probably even with the UK, because getting through the Schengen visa process is really, really complex for anybody. And if you get a Schengen visa, that ought potentially to be good enough for the UK.
Okay. Dr. Frenzel, I wonder if I can talk to you again. The same sort of question really, but Schengen visas, we'll come back to the visa issue later on. But broadly, you know, with your overview as TUI, where do you see the growth coming from? Who's, you know, for your money, who's marketed themselves successfully? Who's built up their infrastructure? Who's created the incentives in terms of lowering these barriers into the border formalities?
TUI has more than 30 million customers. We are growing roughly 3 to 4% a year, and the market is growing. By the way, it's very interesting. The European market is by far still the biggest market. We are market leader in UK, in Germany, in France, and with roughly more than 425 million, more or less, travelers here, we are by far the biggest market, and we will stay the biggest market until the end of the century. It's very interesting. China and the BRIC countries are growing very fast, double digit, but today still on a very small number. And your basic question is, what is driving the growth, or what is moving people to travel? For me, being in the leisure business and also in the business travel business, which is another part, but focusing on the leisure business here, it's very simple. I always tell my people, we are not selling tickets, we are not selling hotels, we are selling dreams to people, because traveling is an integrated part of a certain value. If you, I think, in a certain stage of economic development, you start to travel. It's very interesting. If you see, we are in Russia, we are in China. In the first phase, people start to buy cars, refrigerators. And in the second phase, with a more income and a higher personal income, they start to travel. I really, and this is the strength of our industry, everybody, more or less, it's an inherent part of lifestyle. Everybody, different, no difference between the cultures, want to travel. They travel in a different way, but this is a basic need, and this is driving the growth. And this is very promising for our industry going forward, with all the challenges, clearly, which comes afterwards. How can we handle, in 10 years, 2 billion travelers, which is a huge number. And in my way, I think, and this is going along with a totally change in customers' behavior. They travel in a different way. Basically, they travel, and they will also travel in a new online world, but they travel in a different way. And on the other hand, I think this new development, the digital development, enables us and is a huge potential to facilitate traveling, much better and even better than today. E-visa was mentioned before. The next step is there's a discussion in the industry of, for example, face recognition. I know there is a problem by data security here, but to handle a billion of travelers, a billion of travelers here, the only way I think we can do it in the future is to find ways, digital ways, I think, to handle this. Face recognition, visa, e-visas, or better, no visas, is the only way to manage this, and this is the way forward.
Yeah, I can see that all roads lead back to visas. And we'll come back to that in a moment. But I think you've delineated in a very interesting, very timely reminder that Europe still has the lion's share.
Right.
I mean, that's partly because the borders, of course, are close together. And, you know, people who come from other continents say the thing about Europe is, you know, you drive for an hour and suddenly you're in another country, a different culture and a different language, and used to be anyway, a different currency. Sharisha Mai, Honourable Minister from Bahrain, what are your reactions as you listen to all of this? What are you starting to glean in terms of lessons that you can learn? Well, you've had the Grand Prix in Bahrain, but you need to put Bahrain more on the map in terms of tourism, but you have some challenges.
Of course. But to explain about Bahrain case, our main target or our main market is the GCC country, the regional market. But on the other hand, when we create activities around the Formula One, we attract a lot of people to come. So we started a festival, we name it Cultural Spring of Culture, and that attract a lot of people to come. We create a lot of festival in summer, and you know, our target is to bring the people from the area. There is no problem with the visa issue, but on the other hand also, there is also foreigner people live in the same region. We can attract them more to come to Bahrain. We have something to give it to the people. It's different. Bahrain is a tiny island, rich in culture, different from any other Gulf state. So by focusing on the cultural activity and the World Heritage Site and the ancient history, we can attract more people to come. Of course, we are facing a lot of things, but on the other hand, we are learning from the experience and develop more infrastructure, cultural infrastructure, to be able to attract more people to come to our island.
Honourable Minister, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to take we're just going to go to one more panellist in a moment, and but then I'm going to throw this open to the floor. Oh, good. I'm glad, because we weren't hearing you too well there, Honourable Minister, but I think we all heard okay. I hope so anyway. Let's go to the Philippines. Honourable Minister Jimenez.
Yes.
One of the challenges that you have is that to come to the Philippines, it's always a long-distance flight. Because
Yes.
you're out there in the ocean. You've got
Yes.
neighbours, but they're all relatively close, relatively far away. It's not like the GCC where you know, it's an hour or two's travel almost anywhere between the capitals. It's a long way. You're a long way from anywhere, but you're also a very established tourist destination. Again, tell us what your feelings and what you're starting to glean from this discussion, and where you're thinking this is something that we need to focus and concentrate.
Well, thank you very much, John. So I think the important perspective to establish, as you pointed out, is 98% of all inbound travel to the Philippines arrives by air. And the complexity is that if you look at the map of the Philippines, you will realize very quickly that there are over 7,107 islands. But for the better part of 60 years, we had only one gateway. You could only enter the Philippines through Manila. So if you looked at tourism numbers just as recently as 3 years ago, before we opened our skies, so to speak, you could only fly in through Manila, and therefore we had very poor tourism numbers. It spiked up very dramatically when we started opening up places like Cebu, Puerto Princesa, and areas around famous islands like Boracay to direct international inbound travel. Okay, so that's a very important part. But I think what
is that very much an ongoing process? I mean, is that something
yes.
you're building out the airports and the links there?
Yes, yes. We're still waiting for the cement to dry on a lot of these things, and nobody builds ahead of the demand. So part of my job is precisely to build that demand, to really keep the pressure up, okay, so that my little engagements with my finance minister, etc., are a lot more interesting
than others.
Yes. But the most important, I think, the most important backdrop to this is that the people themselves must be engaged. At the end of the day, tourism is a people business, as Dr. Rifai put it. And if you do not co-opt the people in your campaign, it's not going to work. When we set out to say it's more fun in the Philippines, the reason why it's more fun is not just the place. It is a very, shall we say, potent combination of place and people. And the Filipino people are welcoming to a fault sometimes. I always say you're never a stranger for longer than a day in the Philippines, and if you stay for more than 3 weeks, you could be godfather at somebody's christening. So.
But I'm sure we agree with that. I mean, I know that my encounters with your countrymen and women have always been really very happy indeed. But tell us how successfully, just very briefly before we go a little bit wider in terms of our discussion, tell us how successful you've been in getting tourism from China, and has that changed the nature of your tourism?
Well, we are, as many of the people in this room may have heard, in a very, shall we say, delicate transition in our relationship with China. And it is moving towards a very warm relationship. We are looking to China. In fact, 2013 has been declared the year of friendship between the Philippines and China. And I am off to Shanghai a week from today, precisely because we are actively welcoming group travel to China again, which kind of slowed down over the last few months, since May, but is beginning to come back up. Now, China is a tremendous source of growth for the future, we believe. The numbers keep rising every day. And I was just telling Dirk beside me, that's fantastic news, even from more than just a tourism perspective, because tourism is, shall we say, a kind of disarmament in slow motion. And it is people getting to know each other as people. And that's very important.
Thank you very much indeed, Honourable Minister. I want to take this discussion a little bit wider. We're going to talk about visas, we're going to talk about taxes, and we're going to talk about connectivity in the next phases of this discussion. But I wonder if there's anyone out there who very briefly can perhaps share something with us in terms of growth that they've seen or solutions that they would advocate. Do you have anyone along those lines? Sir. Welcome.
I think the first message I'd like to take is take a
point. Hold on a moment. I think somebody's on their way to you with a microphone. Thank you very much. Sorry. Just introduce yourself.
Alain Saint-Ange, the Minister of Tourism from the Seychelles. I'd like to take a point from Dr. Rifai. Firstly, it's a people's industry. The same was repeated by Mr. Friend, Dr. Friends. We are dealing with people. And I think if we talk about visas, we are already telling a group of people, you're not really our friend. You need a passport. You need something to come to me. You need an application. We're already complicating a group of lives. Seychelles is one small country that says it's friends of all and enemies of none. So nobody needs a visa. Everybody can come in. But we go further than that. And I want to share this because 2-3 days ago I landed in Gatwick, and much to my amazement, the office in London had booked a flight down to Dublin, well, to Shannon actually. And then I realized that tourism is definitely not the industry that you just take it for granted. It's a money-making exercise, that you're just there to count numbers. It's good to talk about 1 billion people, but are we truthfully not embarrassing people? I took an airline on to Shannon. It was one of the low-cost airlines. It was the only one that did the connectivity. And to my amazement, there were people that had landed with me from an Emirates flight in Gatwick. And the lady was crying because she had 18 kilos instead of 14 or 15 that you're allowed. She had to open her bag. And I'd never seen G-strings that were that dental floss. But it was on the floor. And it was so embarrassing, she was crying. And then she came in with 14 kilos, 0.5. And again, she had to go and take the 0.5 out. And she had to buy a bag to put the extras in there. It was so embarrassing that if we're traveling through Europe, we talk about connectivity. We talk about a people's industry. And then we mess up the life of somebody who's coming back to Europe from a holiday somewhere. I tried to help. I said I put some of the G-strings in my pockets, but but I think it is.
I'm sure they didn't make that much difference to the weight.
Well, she had to take things out.
I mean, how much can a G-string weigh?
But
let's go there. That's not a serious question.
She was taking out gifts. She was taking out little souvenirs that she'd bought from everywhere. But this is the first point. The second point I'd like to make is, how do we get the countries? And some countries have spoken about, how do you make yourself more known? South Africa scored beautifully. It is clear with the FIFA World Cup. And the whole of Africa looked at it with admiration. Different countries, you spoke about the music awards that you did. Different countries do it well. Zimbabwe will host next year the UNWTO General Assembly. We need to look at that, but at the same time, work together as an industry. We can't say it is South Africa, it is Africa doing it. And Africa scored well because they rallied the whole of Africa. And I think this is the example we need to take as an industry. Work together, like we come to London, it's WTM, we're all together. It is one industry that we are promoting. And my appeal is for all of us, ministers in the whole wide world, work through UNWTO, work through the WTM organizations. Let us rally our forces to make our industry, truthfully, the people's industry we want to see grow.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Interesting contribution just there along from gentleman from... Yes, exactly.
Hugh Riley, Caribbean Tourism Organization. It's really very difficult to follow the comments from the Minister Saint-Ange. We're not going to do a sort of an underwear study to determine the weight. But I think the point that he was making was this, that we have to understand that the experience begins from the minute you start your journey. It's really not just about what happens in the hotels and happens on the ground and so on. So we have a responsibility collectively to understand the totality of the experience that we're selling. That's the first thing. But the second thing is this, and I really need to ask the ministers for some help with this, particularly Minister Gloria Guevara-Manzo. There's no such thing on the planet as a Minister of Tourism and National Security. So as much as everybody agrees on the importance of facilitating tourism, you still have to convince your cabinet colleagues and your head of state and a whole range of people who are very concerned, as Talib Rifai says, about keeping people out. So how is it that you convince, how do you leave here all fired up on what should happen and then go back to your countries? How is it that you convince all of these people to remove these stupid barriers? How does that work? It worked very successfully in Mexico. Can I find out what the trick is, really?
Well, I can see I've been trying to stand in front of a train here in terms of the discussion on visas. So let's move into the phase of talking about the visas. And perhaps you'd like to, Honourable Minister, you'd like to answer the point there from your neighbour.
Absolutely, yes. I think David was very clear on that point, and Talib as well. There's one person that you have to convince. You don't have to convince your peers. Yes, you have to work with them and, of course, get them engaged and make sure that they understand the benefit that travel and tourism provides, because, unfortunately, there's a lot of lack of understanding. Their job is to keep their country, for instance, or our country secure, but that doesn't mean that they need to block the entrance and don't allow people to come. I think the one here that understands, in our case, travel and tourism was the President as well. And it's just a matter of making sure that he's aware of the benefit. In the case of Obama, it was very clear to me as well, after having the private sector working with Obama and making sure that he understands the benefit for his country and the need that today most of the nations are facing to create more jobs and to have an economic growth. I think travel and tourism brings the best option so far. So we need to do a better job, and that's we collectively sharing best practices, and at the same time take this to the next level. The fact that the G20 already included in the declaration, I think that's one big step ahead, but we need to keep that momentum and work together with the rest of the presidents and heads of the states that they, for whatever reason, they take this industry for granted and they don't appreciate the value that brings. They appreciate the value only when they lose it, when there is a storm or when there is an issue, when they have travelers go to another country and they are impacted. That's when they see the value, I guess.
Okay, Honourable Minister, thank you. I think we had a question over here. If we could or a point, I should say.
Yeah, my name is Naif El-Faiz. I'm the Minister of Tourism and Antiquities for Jordan.
Welcome.
And the Minister of Environment. It's just a comment about the visa issues. In 2008, globally, there were the financial crisis, and everybody was worried about travel and what's going to happen to globally in the tourism industry. Jordan had some nationalities as restricted countries, meaning that if you needed to come to Jordan, you have to obtain visa before you arrive and get your visa upon arrival, because we have a large number of nationalities that they can obtain their visas upon arrival. So we had to make the argument about India, which had to go through that process. So immediately when they lifted restrictions beginning for group visas, so we got an increase of people coming from India to Jordan during that difficult times. We continued to get that increase, and immediately we even dropped the individual travelers to Jordan as tourists, and we saw continuous growth throughout. This would be a case that you can give to your Minister of Finance and your Minister of Interior and so on. You can build a case on it. And we are building cases regarding visas upon arrival for other nationalities that are still restricted. Yes, we do have, unfortunately, to struggle with the Minister of Tourism, with his colleagues from the Interior, but this is something that you have to work it out.
Okay, I'd like to, forgive me, I'd like to bring in the airlines, because I know that this is something that must exercise you. If I could come to you first, Vijay, from Etihad, is this something where you've quietly been putting a lot of pressure on governments saying, look, this works for a lot of people, please think about it yourselves?
Absolutely. I think we're in the business of selling dream flights or dream destinations, but governments have to wake up to the huge potential of travel and tourism by not only removing obstacles. I mean, breaking barriers is no-brainer. We have to move beyond that now. We actually have to adopt almost a paradigm shift, a pro-travel and tourism paradigm shift by national leaders. And I think Gloria is quite right. It has to start from the leadership of a country to actually embrace travel and tourism, and then get the cabinet to basically embrace that, recognizing there are issues with security, there are issues with customs, there are issues with taxes, but together recognize the value of travel and tourism and then embrace it. Otherwise, all the great promotion one does for a country is actually not effective.
Okay, thank you. Martinez van Skarkvijk, I mean, you're, from the government point of view, clearly within South Africa, around the cabinet table, there's huge priority given to tourism. This will be kicking an open door, but what would be your recommendation to other governments who perhaps are more hesitant, saying, you know, we've got big issues here. We feel that there is a security issue. We're not very happy about people coming in here in a fairly unrestricted way.
Well, I think the issues around visas, it's cost, it is security, and it is technology. And on technology, we've already won the debate. The technology is there. On cost, we've already won the debate. It's much cheaper to have e-visas than these cumbersome visa processes. It's only on the security front that we must win the argument. But there's no question, if we analyze that debate properly, it's much more secure to use e-visas than the present visa system. So the question is, are we going to e-visas? And not only e-visas, what will follow e-visas? I think we're going to go through phases. We're going to go through a phase of visa waivers. Some countries have mentioned it. Then regional visas. And the next step within the next 10 years, I believe most countries here present will have e-visas. But then we will end up, in my view, within a few years with M-visas on our mobile phones and on our tablets. But last week, and I don't easily commend the Australians in cricket and rugby, but they were quicker out of the blocks than any one of us. They announced last week, and we have to commend them, that next year, from any country in the world, people will be able to apply online for visas to go to Australia. So I think this is an unstoppable train. It's going to happen within the next 10 years. The only question is, are we in government going to ensure it is 5 years instead of 10 years? Yeah. But e-visas and smart visas, it's coming.
This is the point that Dr. Frenzel was making a moment ago, that, you know, we've now got e-tickets for pretty well everything. Just show up with your passport. In future, the visa should be there as well.
Absolutely. Can I say on that issue of technology, if you take e-tickets, in 1994, when United Airlines said they're going to switch over to e-tickets, well, they were basically the only one for a number of years. 10 years later, in 2004, only 20% uptake, Jeff, in the airline industry. Today, the whole airline is there. And it's not only e-visas. We should also look at e-passports. There's already more than 600 e-passports all over the world with a little chip in, storing your biographic and biometric data, facial recognition, retina recognition, fingerprint recognition. In 2020, 80% of the world will have e-visas. Interesting thing, China is the world leader at the moment. So this really is an unstoppable train.
Okay. Jeff, if we can just come to you. I know that you're keen to say something. Then I'd like to come to Hugh Robertson and talk about some of the other difficulties.
The point has been made that the airline business has gone to 100% e-ticketing. We've done a number of other major investments and changes in the airline industry to make things better, secure freight, baggage management, all those sorts of things. In the context of this debate, there are two things, I think, that come out very strongly. The first is the need to advocate the need for change. You know, we're all convinced in this room, and the point was made earlier about how do you get out there? Well, collectively, we have to develop the compelling case for change. When we were doing electronic ticketing, a large number of the airline CEOs said, no, not my airline, not for the next 10 years. And so you have to develop that compelling case for change. And I think Martinez just made some of those points. Because and we can do that as an industry so that we can go around state by state and influence people, not just leave it to the tourism minister in the country concerned, but come across with a global initiative that says, state by state, this is what we need to be doing. These are the requirements, here are the deliverables. Most importantly then, my second point is the implementation. These things don't happen just by making declarations at conferences like this. They have to be project managed. You have to understand what the deliverables are. You have to have toolkits for people. You have to provide support. And this is something that the states who have already gone through visa transformation can support the remaining states. And so we need to get to a global solution here. Part of that will be common standards, mutual recognition of visas and so on. But we need to manage the overall situation because it won't happen by itself. And I think that's a role for global bodies like UNWTO. It's a big challenge, but it's what we in IATA had to do for our airline members. This is much more difficult because it's a change management process with multiple stakeholders on an international basis. Even more reason why it won't happen unless we manage it, make it happen, and convince people that it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Very important marker put down there by you, Jeff. Thank you very much indeed, Jeff Poole from IATA. Hugh Robertson, there are difficulties with visas coming here to the UK. I mean, to some extent, we're victims of our own success. A lot of people want to come here, and not always for the best reasons. Do you see progress being made, thanks to technology or thanks to perhaps a more relaxed security situation?
There isn't. I mean, it's interesting listening to the debate. I think if we try and frame this debate as tourism versus homeland security, we're going to get in a lot of difficulties because I have lived for the last 2.5 years of my ministerial life with security assessments around a major global sports event, certainly if not every day, every week. And anybody who pretends that there is not a major international security issue, I'm afraid is talking rubbish. And it is, whether we like it or not, this is going to be, it has been with us in this country for all of my adult life, and I was a soldier for a bit. I don't see any sign of this going away soon. So the question, I think, is not tourism versus homeland security, but how you adjust the procedures to guarantee security to make it much easier for people to navigate and negotiate their way through it. And that is why things like, e-visas, the technology that will enable us to do this more smoothly and efficiently. Interestingly enough, over an Olympic Games, so you have to process thousands of people into a country in a very short space of time, and then actually with the Paralympics afterwards, accompanied by extraordinarily difficult and awkward pieces of equipment that you've got to keep with them. I mean, it's a huge challenge. It's the process of how you collect the data you need beforehand so that their passage through the borders is efficiently managed and they have a really good experience of it is one of the key challenges you face. But you do that by process, not by fighting against the fact that there is a security situation.
But the process is getting faster. It has to be.
The process is
getting more satisfactory.
That's the way to tackle this. It's not to fight against homeland security issues.
Well, okay, but I mean, can you see progress with process?
Yes, I can.
Because,
No, it's absolutely,
and is it technology that's
yes,
or better intelligence?
It's better processing. Technology. Intelligence plays a part in this, but it is. I think the great advances are around technology, the ability to apply online for these. I mean, there are data issues, but I think the data industry in itself is a little bit behind where technology is. Some of the data storage rules, a little bit behind where technology is at the moment. But it is around those sort of technological innovations that we're going to make improvements here. I don't think you'll make them by taking on Homeland Security as long as we have an international terrorism problem.
Can you give us a time scale? I mean, are we talking, because
no, I mean,
Martinez was talking about in terms of 2020.
I can't remember who it was who said we should try and do this over 5 years, not 10. That is absolutely right. The trick is to make progress.
Because this is actually grit in the wheels of normal business, not just tourism, absolutely. Isn't it? It becomes more difficult for people
but you must never, as I say, it's very easy at a conference like this, where we're all representing the tourism industry, to stand up and say it's all the fault of Homeland Security. I'm just saying, on the basis of my experience over 2.5 years, anybody who pretends that this is not an issue or it is one that it can be easily overcome is living in dreamland, because the threat is out there.
I don't think that the idea that that terrorism is not a threat, I don't think many people entertain that here in this room. I think people, we're all aware of what a terrorist attack can do to your tourism industry. I mean, it will blight it for years. I mean, I don't know. I'm getting a lot of nods around here. So, I mean, I think we're all aware of the balance here. Martinez, you want to come in here?
I agree. It's not briefly. A trade-off between tourism and security. The question is, how do we get and ensure better security? That's the point. But what we must never underestimate, this will bring to the fore the debate between privacy and security as well. Because this system will depend on people making available ahead of time private information, so that information can be stored. And within a few years from now, once again, the airline and airports people will be able to tell you, there will be two groups of people whose information are on the system. Once you arrive at the airport, just as you exit now, a green and a red channel, there will be a green channel and a red channel. So it will make travel much easier, but it will bring to the fore the old debate between government power, security and privacy.
Let's get briefly, Dr. Frenzel.
Yeah, briefly. Let me come back to one remark which was made before. We have to look at the whole travel experience, not only, and visa and airline, air connectivity are only parts and the hurdles in between. So basically there where the private industry is coming in and the public sector and the private industry has to work together. Our message is to facilitate the whole travel experience, starting with the booking, the traveling by air or however, and the stay, and to look together and secure this. And it's very important, for example, if you see the development, how people book, and along this whole travel experience, and this technology change is coming in, we call it, there are today digital touch points. The customer is 24 hours linked to us, and at every stage, on the airport, in the hotel, he's linked to us, and he's sharing his travel experience with us and with other customers here. And therefore, to control this process is very important. Give you one example. I'm pretty sure our online bookings today are roughly 25-26%. In 4 or 5 years will be 50 to 60%. In some countries like Scandinavia, we have today 65%, 70% online. Could you imagine that somebody booking online then is obliged to go to an embassy and ask for a visa? And therefore, the countries which will not have an online application will be out of this competition in a couple of years, I'm pretty sure. And this is, I think, the biggest, more or less, challenge for these countries.
Okay, another important marker. To Olga Mariam, from the point of view of Ethiopian Airlines, I mean, I'm very interested to hear what your take on this is from a fast-developing area of Africa in terms of tourism.
I think, as my colleagues said, we have to see from value chain management point of view. It's not only visa and connectivity. In fact, in the airline business, when airlines meet among ourselves, we believe and we talk about excess capacity. And of course, there are underserved markets, but in general, globally, there is excess capacity in the airline business. So coming to tourism, we have to see from the entire value chain management, from beginning to end. And at national level, I think it's a matter of policy coordination, whether it is security or securing the borders, and also facilitating process for the tourists, and also managing the air travel with airlines. It's a matter of policy coordination because it's balancing the balancing act among the stakeholders. At a regional level and global level, I think the industry can learn from the airline industry, especially IATA. IATA has done a very good job in bringing together all airlines to a common standard, common denominator, ticketing, IOSA, and so on, and E-freight now going well. So how did it manage? Number one, I think IATA made it mandatory for all airlines, member airlines, to comply with. So compliance was not a matter of choice, it was a matter of being a member for IATA. I don't know if the WTO can do as much as IATA did, but I think efforts can be done. And different regions, different countries are in different stages of development in terms of travel and tourism. When we take in Africa, for instance, infrastructure is equally an important impediment.
I think I want to talk to you about that in perhaps a slightly later phase of the discussion, but let's leave that there for now. Thank you very much indeed, though, Mr. Kabramariam. Let's take one or two interventions from the floor. Gentleman here, and then I'll come to you, sir.
I'm Walter Mzembi, the Minister of Tourism for Zimbabwe.
Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to get a bit more practical. I'm leading a delegation of 21, 50% of whom have not arrived. And we've been working so hard to make an appearance at WTM. They are not here because their visas were not processed. But I want to thank the British government for giving me a 6-month visa for the first time, where in the past they used to give me only 7 days. But it can only be practical to the extent that I lead delegations that are allowed to enter into the country. If we are going to make sense out of WTM, which we value so much. Fiona sends us lots of letters and communication prior to WTM, but it must amount to our practical presence in the United Kingdom, particularly on our stands, where I'm now being forced to do double work to mend some of the absentee chairs. But having said that, I think I want to just go a little bit backwards and say that yes, we can open borders and skies, we can facilitate visas, but if we don't live up to the ethics that we subscribe to as nation states, especially on travel advisories, all we are discussing here can easily come to waste. I recall very clearly in Astana, Kazakhstan, Secretary General, us coming up with an article, I think it was Article 6, on the need for governments to inform their citizens on the possible dangers that they may face in host countries. And that responsibility is reposed on governments, but you can only do it to the extent that you are also fair to the host countries by making sure that you consult them before you promulgate travel advisory regimes. So let's be honest with each other when we sit in these forums, and also make sure that as tourism ministers we put in a word or two of advice to our home offices and FCOs before they pronounce travel advisories. Otherwise, why would we come here, a home minister leads a delegation, and he arrives with half the delegation. Even when he arrives, he discovers that the host country that he has visited has unilaterally placed a travel advisory that for all intents and purposes may not be accurate, only because we have not discussed it. So I was hoping that we can, as we discuss visas and accessibility issues, we also get back a little bit backwards on the issues of principle to make sure that we comply to some of the provisions. I know the UK may not be a member of the UNWTO, but just the moral side of it demands that we continue to talk around these issues. I thank you.
Okay. Honourable Minister, thank you very much indeed. There was a question over here, gentleman over there. I'll come to you in a moment, Minister. Thank you. Just here. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm Jean-José Bertani. I am from Monaco, Principality, the second smallest country in the world. And I would just bring you my experience. I'm traveling for now more than 40 years, as I'm in travel industry for that time. And I'm part of 8,000 citizens in the world. 8,000. And believe me, it's a nightmare sometimes to travel around the world, even in Europe, because Monaco, we mix with Morocco. It's exotic. It is sometimes surprising, suspicious, and if I don't need a visa for the country, it happens that I can stay 10, 15 minutes there at the border, just wait that the guy check exactly which country I am. Even when I go to England, I come to Great Britain, I cannot go through the channel European countries. I have to go rest of the world, simply because there is no agreement between Great Britain and Monaco. We are not recognized as a European country. So every time Monegasque people cross the border in England, they have to go through all over the world countries where I am asked, where do I stay, how long I stay, why did I come to Great Britain, which is something fancy. But I would just tell you my dream. My dream is simply that all the country in the world could say what a French poet say about Monaco. She said that Monaco was the only country in the world where borders were made by flowers. So my dream is that all the country in the world could have borders made by flowers.
Minister Goraev.
Thank you. I would like to point to one position which I think is necessary to talk about. The visa facilitation is the matter of always permanent concern of the other bodies within the government. And it's clear that the matter of the security is very important. But there is an old joke. Let us not mix tourism with migration. So we have to assist our tourist companies which are working with the tourism flows, with the business authorities which are responsible for arranging tourism, for facilitation of these visas. I can give you an example how we did it in our country at the first stage. When asked that to acquire visa to Azerbaijan through the tourist company costs only $20 instead of different prices which are implemented to different countries. And the tourist company is presenting the necessary documentations and takes responsibility for those who are really going to be tourists within the country. I think that in this case we are supporting not only the travel possibilities between the countries, but at the same time we are supporting the business atmosphere within the country. We give floor to work more clean, more strong and more fast to our tourist companies. And I think that it was advice from our aviation authorities. Maybe we will work out some recommendations through the World Tourism Organization, at least to recommend the countries which have these difficulties within the visa implementations to work a new regime with the tourist visas. If we let it be visas for 1 week, 10 days, 1 month, I don't know. Because when we apply to visa to different embassies, they consider ourselves sometimes like tourists, sometimes like business people, and all of us have different purposes to fly, to go. This is the point. I think that we must take care a little about the people who are within the tourism business and to push them forward in these difficulties. Of course, technologies will come, e-visas will come, but maybe these tourism companies will take care about arranging the system of the applying for visas to the different embassies, countries, and so on.
Okay, it's a maybe. I gather we had somebody over, gentleman. Yes, here we are. Yes, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you.
I'm Maithil Mahrouqi, Under Secretary of Ministry of Tourism, Sultanate of Oman, one of the GCC countries. It's a great honor to be here, and I would like to thank WTO and Fiona for this magnificent summit, and it's been really inspiring. I just would like to share some points what we have done in Oman, and one of the experience which has been really challenging, what you're mentioning, is the transportation overall. We've seen the expansion of air transport in the GCC country. I'm sure you've seen Etihad, Qatariya, Emirates, and now like we have our national carrier Oman Air as well is coming up. And it's been a really wall of competing in that area, and which is, we've seen a lot of it connect with all the global. What we have done actually now, we're trying to liaise between those areas, how you can link the tourism with the aviation industry. And just a thought to this sharing with everybody, what we have done is liaising the visas issues between us and the UAE, which is our neighboring country. And everybody think is competing each other, but it's been really complementing that area. So people who are arriving in Dubai, because they have more access to that area, they can access to Sultanate of Oman. And that have shown a magnificent area of increase of passengers or tourism or tourists coming to Oman. And one point I would like to maybe to put it here, it's just even region areas, how they can really liaise among themselves, how to link that together. And not only looking into the air transportation, but we have done is even the cruise ship. And in Oman this year, we have increased 24% of the cruise ship accessing to Oman by just easing the visa process for them. So a lot of people just focusing on airlines, focusing on other borders. There is another industry there for some regions are very, like I know the Caribbeans, and if you see increasing that as a market in Oman for 24%, I can say that was a great achievement. And that because we just eased, they had only 24 hours, but we gave them up to 3 days access to 3 different areas in Oman. One other area it was, I think, raised here, how you can improve the link between the government or aviation industry is always private sector. What we have done and experienced in putting the Board of Authority is through 3 major stakeholders as a government and the Ministry of Tourism and as well the Migration Authority. They go under one Board of Authority in Oman, and they are the liaising people, and we've seen decisions have been taken much, much quicker. And I thought just this to share with you. And because of that, we have seen an increase this year of arrivals through our airports, almost 18% up to end of September. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Minister. That's a great number. I'm sure that a lot of people would like to be able to have that kind of success under their belts. Vijay, I know you were itching to get in here.
Just one quick comment, because I think it's important in this debate on facilitation, security and so on to recognize that the travel and tourism sector has a vested interest in safe and secure travel and destinations. So it's not as if we want destinations which are not secure. We actually have a vested interest in it. So what we are looking for is actually efficient security and facilitation processes, because you can be safe and secure and actually be efficient as well. You don't need to be obnoxious about it. And what we urge actually is UNWTO and ICAO to work together on both issues, because ICAO has a mandate on promoting facilitation and security as well. And if UNWTO were to work together with them and actually have a joint program reaching out to governments, that would actually have a significant impact.
Okay, David, I know you want to come in here too.
Just pick up on Jeff's point a second ago about the process management of this. We collectively have a real difficulty with this because the implementation of online ticketing processing was within the airline sphere, with the IATA driving it, and it swept around the world very, very fast. When we talk to the Interpol people, they will say even within Europe they cannot get countries to agree on sharing of information. So there's no process behind that at this particular juncture. So even if we could home in on some of the best practice. Australia is always quoted as being the best practice in terms of facilitating technology to the satisfaction of the interior services there. Even if we could isolate that as a best practice to spread around the world. At the moment, there is no organization, there's no IATA for the interior ministries that can help us drive that forward. And that's pretty fundamental. We've been to the G20 leaders with the value of visa facilitation, another 5 billion jobs, another $260 billion, if between India, China, Schengen countries, principally, they can fix this issue. But the technology perspective, to Hugh Robertson's point, I don't see a way forward at the moment in process management terms.
Okay, sorry, Michael. I'm going to take a question at the back there, and then I'm going to move on to one or two other issues that Tyler raised in his opening speech.
Editor of the Parity Democrat Westminster. In Mumbai, Rio de Janeiro, is a question especially for the Secretary General of the WTO. In Mumbai, Rio de Janeiro and Tokyo, there are whole trains, whole carriages and rush hour sections dedicated exclusively to women. Is this a practice which you would encourage in other major cities, and can UNWTO make available a list of cities which already do this?
Okay, I think that's actually outside the remit of what we've been discussing here. I don't know if, Tyler, do you want to answer that? Pat will answer it offline, perhaps?
I will be more than happy to answer him after this privately, together, one-to-one.
Sure, okay. Let's move on. Now, I'll take one more question on visas. Lady here.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Liz Kramer, Minister of Tourism of Paraguay. Just to share one thing and perhaps give an idea. I have been fighting for visa on arrival and e-visa for about 7 years, and this Friday I'm going to finally get it in my country.
Who have you been fighting? Your colleagues?
Yes,
okay.
well, everyone.
Thanks for being frank about that.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because basically they were sometimes, of course, it's security, but also it's administrative, an administrative issue. Visas that are taken or given in consulates sometimes support those consulates. We are from a developing country, and that is an administrative issue that is important for some embassies and consulates. So sometimes those who really didn't want to move forward with this e-visa issue were those in the administrative departments of the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Anyway, that being solved, what I want to give an example is that when I was trying to find out a way for the e-visa in my country, the U.S. Embassy helped us find around the world which country had more or less our size and our structure and had already in place a software that would allow us to do this faster, because if each and every country has to develop its own software, it's very expensive, and most of us will not be able to achieve it.
I'm fascinated to find out, I'm sure we're all thinking, which country could be the same as Paraguay in terms of size and structure and need for the same software?
Not the same size and structure, but something that we could achieve to become. Okay. It was Armenia. This is this was found out by the U.S. Embassy. For their assistance, they were very much interested in us moving forward for the e-visa. So Armenia had a software for U.S. citizens and some other countries that was applicable to us, and we are still in the process of learning about that software, bringing the Armenians to Paraguay, know what we have, in order to know what we need to accomplish, what they have, and so on. But that particular issue made me think that although now, starting next week, we are moving to on-arrival visa for 5 countries, which is absolutely great for us.
For 5 countries?
For 5 countries, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Taiwan. Okay. The next step is e-visa. But if every small country, like in my case, has to develop and find out its way and so on, it's going to be very costly. So perhaps out of this issue here at this event, maybe, I don't know if WTO and other agencies can't collect information on what which of these softwares can be really applicable, or just a lot of just more information on that for other countries to learn and to see the applicability of those softwares in our countries.
Okay, Minister, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move on actually, because Taleb, Dr. Rifai, in the start, you identified two other issues which I'd like to talk to, which are obstacles to the growth of tourism and may or may not be legitimate. Well, certainly in the case one is probably not legitimate. I know we're going to talk about connectivity. Mr. Gebremariam, you talked about that earlier on, but let's just talk briefly about APD, about taxes. Jeff Poole, can you help us here? The levels of taxation clearly vary from one country to another. But again, this is grit in the wheels, isn't it? Certainly in terms of your members in IATA, but also in terms of tourism more broadly.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think and for tourism in particular, because as was mentioned earlier, 52% of tourists arrive by air, and that's a growing percentage. So despite all of the promise of tourism and the growth potential that we've heard about here, that will come to nothing unless aviation has a license to grow in parallel. That's important in the sense of bringing tourists, but it's also important because of the economic benefits that aviation drives. 35% of world trade is carried by air, by value. So, that's developing the economic growth that enables people to travel and so on. So it's a holistic picture here. The moment you start putting barriers in the way, whether that's no infrastructure in place so that people can't travel, or whether it's taxes that make it economically unviable, is a huge issue for everybody. And I mean, the APD in the UK is, as we say, the mother of all taxes. And it is absolutely the worst example of self-defeating principle here, based on revenue raising in the short term for the country concerned. There are many other examples of that around the world, and we're campaigning very actively against them. But it's back to what I was talking about earlier. In order to overcome aviation taxes, you have to get people to understand the benefits of aviation and the benefits of travel and tourism. Hence the approach that we've been taking with the UNWTO and WTTC to get the G20 to give us a top-down approach.
But the reality is every industry in the world says, we don't want to be taxed because we're too valuable. You've got, and yet governments have to raise taxes from somewhere. They can't all come directly out of our income taxes.
Exactly, which is again why we have to advocate very strongly, because there's a compelling case for not taxing aviation and limiting tourism, because the economic benefits are so much larger than the short-term revenue that's gained from taxation. That's something which is not well understood. And it's a campaign that we have to constantly engage in, because, as with due respect to the ministers here, politics is a revolving door. So the moment you convince one minister in one country to listen to you, he's going to change again. So this is a constant campaign for the entire industry to make everybody understand the value of what we do, and that is much more important than short-term tax revenue.
Now, here we are. We've got a minister on the panel who's leaping into the breach. I was going to say, do I have a volunteer for a mission not exactly impossible, but rather difficult?
A long list of volunteers, actually.
Really? I can see, yeah, okay.
Well, I think it's about APD. You has just been appointed minister here, so I think we'll have other forums and fora to discuss this issue with him. But to say that I think APD is a good example where many of us in developing countries see that as actually a tax on our exports, and especially on our green exports. And it's not an issue about taxes. The airline industry, like everybody else, should pay their taxes. It's an issue about unfair taxes. That's the issue. And for
so
a
you're
global
seeing it in
industry,
a sense almost like a tariff barrier.
It's a tariff and trade barrier.
If you were exporting widgets and Ruritania imposes a swinging 25% tax on widgets, you'd think that was the same thing.
That is exactly what it is. But it's not only APD, it's Germany, and there are some other countries as well. And the latest one, the newest kid on the block, is the European Union Emissions Trading Scheme, another tax that taxes airlines, our airlines flying from our parts of the world, not only developing countries, but other developed countries, out of the EU airspace. So that's really an extraterritorial unilateral tax. And we have to globalize a system where we can have fair taxes and stop the market distortions. And that is really the problem that we have at the moment. So it's not taxes, it is unfair taxes that are just springing up all over the globe.
Okay, another minister.
Just
Mr. Menes.
again, from our point of view, there is also the additional issue of reciprocity. Our country, for example, came very recently under tremendous pressure to abolish, which is what we're doing as I speak, to abolish a common carriers tax, only to be stunned to realize that, and the issue that was brought up with us then was reciprocity. Okay? Only to be stunned by news, for example, of an APD that is, in effect, a tax on us and our airlines. And it is, in fact, something that must be taken in that larger context. If tourism and tourism exchange is, in fact, seen as a global effort, then there must be, if you ask me to put down my taxes, then you must reciprocate, as the principle goes.
Thank you, Minister. Gentleman here, very, very keen to intervene.
Thank you very much. I'm Minister of Tourism from Maldives. I would like to present Maldivian case. I would like to support UNWTO Secretary General Tadrib Fai's statement that aviation should go with tourism. We had an experience, we are marking the 40th year of celebration of tourism in Maldives, where tourism was always with civil aviation together. But for last 3 years actually, tourism was separated from aviation, which resulted in privatization of the only airport we had, and started lobbying to tax an airport development fee of $27 per passenger for 25 years. But actually, through tourism lobbying, it didn't go through the parliament. We were able to stop it because we believe it's not fair. Maldives tourism developed with a feasible airport, which is accessible to a lot of airlines, so that the success of Maldives tourism is by having a easy airport, feasible access, and all visa is free, and visa is available to all the countries. So we don't want to change that, and we felt that it's our biggest market is Europe. Europe is going through a tough time. So we were able to lobby against airport development fee for 25 years. So I believe that APD should also be rethinked because we are there to sacrifice to bring in more European tourists, to make airlines feasible, and also make Maldives as a tourism destination for the world. So if we are able to sacrifice that, I believe that that Europe also should reconsider, because it's going to be, we are a small economy which is totally dependent on tourism, will be impacted surely. So I was beneficial to have a dinner yesterday in Parliament with BATA and UNWTO. So I thought I would like to share this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. David.
The economic impact on a lot of countries in this room from APD has never been sized, but it's clearly substantial. But just look at the UK itself. The research that we produced on this shows that the Chancellor receives, I think, £2.8 billion approximately. But by our estimates, it's actually destroying 4.2 billion of GDP in the UK and putting some 90,000 jobs at risk. But I think the key thing for us is that the informal feedback from the Treasury is you tell us which industry to move that 2.8 billion to, then we can have a conversation. But I have significantly bigger problems to manage in the economy in the UK than just this tax on tourism. So I don't think we're likely to get much movement in the UK in the very short term. However, having said that, if you look at the Netherlands and Ireland that have done the numbers and have withdrawn that APD, that is good. That's optimistic for us, for an industry. But what we have to focus on is stopping this tax spreading across other countries, because it started as a green tax, it became a revenue income stream to the UK exchequer here, but we have to fight very hard across other countries to make sure that other governments don't look at this as a simple source of revenue acquisition and impose the same thing.
Okay, David, thank you very much. I'm actually going to park the APD discussion there because I think we're running out of time. And I know that one other issue that you flagged, Taleb, which is the issue of connectivity, is a very important one. And I promised you, Mr. Gebremariam, to come back to you on that issue, because I know that it's a subject very close to your heart at Ethiopian Airlines.
Connectivity, as I said before, we have to see different markets differently. Some markets are already with excess capacity, and that is resulting problem to the airlines, because in the industry, in the aviation industry in general, everybody else makes money except the airlines, and as a result of that, service is coming down, low cost and low fare, and what Minister was telling us before, 14.5 kg, and the passenger was having a problem. This kind of problems are coming to the industry because the industry is already squeezed with heavy taxation on the input side. Taxation, by the way, is not direct tax. There are also indirect tax. Some of the inputs in the aviation industry, like fuel, is also heavily taxed. And when you put together, the aviation industry is taxed more than alcohol and cigarette in some countries. But it has to be seen as essential public service. And of course, essential engine to economic development, because mobility and connectivity is essential for economic growth. So connectivity also needs policy coordination at national level, at regional level, and at the global level.
Good. Dave Van Beek, can you help us in terms of what we're losing out on because we don't have the kind of idealized connectivity that we should have? I mean, we're hearing a very interesting story from Roman Jimenez, the Honourable Minister from Philippines, talking about how you're broadening the gateways into the Philippines from just Manila to being a host of other locations where the concrete, as we learned, is still drying. I mean, what are we losing out on? Presumably the world almost.
Well, that's exactly right. Technology could be anything. It could be anywhere. And whatever man can dream up or whatever issue or problem we have, we can find the answer in technology most often. So really, you know, I'm a firm believer in the private sector working with the public sector, working together, looking at issues, looking at problems, and working together to find the solution. And I think that, you know, the technology sector is more than willing to do that and want to do that.
Okay, let me take one or two, the gentleman here, just one or two interventions from the floor, then I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap up.
Charles, thank you. Martin Craigs, PATA, based in Bangkok. I'm very pleased we were able to host the Minister of the Maldives and many of you in the inner circle in the House of Commons last night. As I said in this room in my second week in the job, rather impertinently, we're very good at talking to ourselves. Singing to the choir is very easy. My suggestion is we do more of what Jeff has proposed, what more of Michael has proposed. We stop politicians thinking of us as a frivolous, light relief industry. With due respect, Minister, you're a soldier. You're not prepared to fight with Homeland Security. I agree with you. Are you prepared to fight with your own treasury for a righteous cause? Because if your government continues to take £2.9 billion from this industry every year with no effort to pass any of it on for any environmental causes, which your predecessors in the Labour government pretended they were going to do, if you continue to do that, I would suggest your colleagues are going to have a lot of difficulty in the next general election from people who'd like freedom of movement as well as freedom of expression, because it is beyond hypocritical for the British government to lecture everyone else around the world about free trade, as Matthias has said, yet tax and disallow your own travelers to visit those countries, to help with economies that urgently need tourism, countries that you give social development funding to, and then with the same arm take away their right to grow through tourism. It is illogical and is hypocritical, and one of your colleagues the minister, the MP, Pritil Patel, quite firmly stated last night, it was an exercise in self-harming.
Well, let's leave that there. Thank you very much. Do you want to come back on that, or?
I suppose I sort of have to.
You can do so quite briefly.
I'll try and do so quite quickly. The point, in a sense, was made very well earlier on. I'm a member of Parliament. We're about to go into a budgetary phase. Sitting on my desk in my constituency are 8 different campaigns, all of which are arguing for a reduction in taxation. You have the same issue around road haulage. You have the same issue around value-added tax on listed buildings. You have the same issue around beer production. You have the same issue around alcohol, and so on and so forth. Nobody likes taxes. I absolutely understand the impact of this, but we are a country in a very considerable financial crisis at the moment, and exactly as David said, the first question the Treasury will ask, and do ask, and we've had these discussions with them, is if we're not going to get that 2.8 billion off air passenger duty, where are we going to get it from? Because we have a large deficit to fulfill. Absolutely, we will continue to fight this battle, but you just have to recognise the realities of the financial position that a number of our countries are in.
Okay, can we take one more intervention from somebody maybe who hasn't spoken before? Otherwise, I think I'm going to wrap up. Okay. I'm told, again, somebody I can't see. Minister from Egypt? Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. I just listening and learning more, but quick points here. The issue of APD for Egypt is very funny, because I was trying to argue the same arguments everybody around here is arguing, and I was told, you have a simple thing to do. Just move your capital from Cairo to Alexandria, and you're off the hook. For 200 kilometers, we're not fairly treated with the other countries around. Turkey, Greece, Tunisia, everybody is paying less than half of what we're doing. And I'm telling the British government that you are extending helping hands to Egypt. We only need the helping hand in this area. Just lift this, or at least equalize us with the people around, the countries around us, and we'll be in for business. And because what is happening is we're making Egypt more poor in that respect, because the industry members in Egypt is actually trying to absorb this tax by lowering the offers they're doing for the tour operators here in Britain. So actually, we're subsidizing Britain again. So this issue needs to be revisited in a way and addressed in a different way. Regarding the connectivity issue, Egypt is a good example for when the aviation minister was the same minister for tourism. 20 years ago, we only received 1 million people, generating only $300 million. But when the Ministry of Aviation was the very same Ministry of Tourism, he opened the door, made the open sky policies for many sub-products in Egypt, and the accessibility was there, and the figure jumped. By 2010, we reached almost 15 million tourists, generating $12.5 billion US. It's a good case for everybody to study, because when the Minister of Tourism is the very same Minister of Aviation, things do move in the right direction. Thank you.
Honourable Minister, thank you very much. I'm going to have to draw things to a close. I mean, I've learnt an immense amount in the past hour or two, and I'm sure you have as well. But let me just crystallise a very, very few bullet points. The talking has to continue, and not just in this room. Clearly, there has to be that crucial discussion between you as an industry and government, on the one hand, but equally the people, because as the Minister from the Philippines reminded us, this is a people business. Your people, the people who ultimately will welcome your visitors, they have to be engaged as well. So they need to be part of the dialogue. The other thing is process is going to be so important. If we move towards these e-visas, there has to be a great deal more talking, not just in terms of talking between intelligence services, but also in terms of developing the technology. Connectivity is very important. feel that I've shortchanged that issue. But I think the issue of how do we build out the air links, how do we build out the airports, where they're needed, where they can develop the industry, that's very important. The dialogue needs to be kept up on that. Finally, I want to thank you all very much for joining in this discussion, which has been very interesting, I hope very fruitful. Let's all relax, get some lunch. Thank you very much.